Should Christians be teachable? Question mark.
Boom,
And
boom,
how can we learn to discipline our desires and all these other things? That is what we're talking about today, as well as hearing some stories about becoming more deeply attached with God. Welcome back to the Attaching to God podcast. Today we have Dr. A.J. Swoboda. He's a professor, writer, and pastor. He is a professor, this is the official title, the Associate Professor of Bible Theology and World Christianity at Bushnell University. He also leads a doctoral program in Christian formation and soul care at Friends University, which, newsflash, Sid also teaches that, but she does a master's
Oh,
class,
yeah.
whereas you, AJ, are doing the doctoral program. He
Next
has written
level.
many books. Recently, he's written one called The Gift of Thorns, Jesus, the Flesh, and the War for Our Wants. I love that, War for Our Wants. But most recently, and we're going to touch on near the end, is his most recent book called A Teachable Spirit, the virtue of learning from strangers, enemies, and absolutely anyone. Because did you know, AJ, that being a know-it-all is not a fruit of the Spirit?
I've heard this. In fact, I put it
Heard
on.
Have you said that to your own child, in fact?
Yeah. You know, first of all, can I just say, Geoff, it's a delight to be attached to you on the Attaching to God podcast, because it's so good to see you.
It's great to see you too. I don't know why we haven't done this so much sooner.
Yeah.
Like, I run a whole podcast. Why can't I have my friends on?
Yeah, that's true. This beard that you're sporting though is beatific. I'm digging it all, bro.
Oh, excellent. Can I be on my a Dr. Claw icon with a giant beard and a robe or something? For those of you not watching on YouTube, I've been growing my beard out.
With some grays. We both got some grays going on.
Yes. Yeah, I know. We got to know each other when we were young.
We did.
And now not as young.
In former years. Yep.
Well, before we get into some of your kind of like spiritual backstory, I love asking people, how did you get into what you're doing? You were a pastor for many years as well as a professor. You're primarily a professor now. How did you stumble, get called, get forced into what you do?
Yeah. It's been to be candid, some of it is a bit of a surprise. I can't tell you that I would have imagined when I was sitting in my high school math class, at 16 years old. I can't imagine that I would have ever thought my life would be where it is now. But in a lot of respects, the journey of pastoring for years and then teaching, and then kind of the writing life and being an academic and running a doctorate ministry program and doing a lot of pastoral work with people. It's come and gone, and through some great and horrible seasons all at the same time. I was just lecturing on Abraham's journey, how when he was called from Ur to go to the Promised Land, when you follow his path of his journey, the first part of the path from Ur to down to Canaan takes him along this river, and rivers are awesome because you can fish and you don't have to fight on both sides, and it provides protection and water and all this stuff. So the first half is along the river, but then the second half of the journey is like through this desert. There's no water and there's no predictability and yet, he's following God the whole way, whether it's along the river or through the desert. And there have been seasons of life that Geoff have felt like we're walking the river. It's clear. We know what God's doing. There's good food, feel protected. And then seasons that feel like you're walking through the desert. And yet the Lord is the Lord of both the desert and the river. He takes you through both. So yeah, it really is. My journey is as much a surprise to me as it is to anybody else. I would have never imagined doing what I do now, but the Lord of Providence is the Lord that takes us often where we don't know or want to go to. I've only had one time in my life, I've had a couple of times where there have been prophetic Holy Spirit anointed words that were spoken over me that I knew in the moment, Geoff, were from God. Like, that didn't take reflection. I just knew it. And one of them was the story in John 21 where Jesus tells Peter after his restoration, where Jesus says to him, When you were younger, you went where you wanted to go, but when you're older, someone else will dress you, and you'll go where you don't want to go. And
Wow.
I remember at one point reading Henry Nouwen did a whole thing on how that's the inversion. That's the inversion of the American dream, where in the American dream, when you're young, you don't do what you want, but when you retire, you do everything you want. But the kingdom of God it's often the opposite, where you start with freedom and you move to more and more faithfulness to what God's called you to do.
Yeah.
And I can't say necessarily that I'm increasingly doing all the stuff that I want to do, Geoff, but I'm increasingly moving into the things that God has designed me to do and are sovereign places, but they're not always places I want to go, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Um, a couple of things came to mind when you talked about Abraham's journey from the river in the wilderness in the desert. In our youth group, we actually have our kids do emotional check-ins, and we ask that two thing: when have you had river moments, and when have you had a wilderness moment? Because we want to train them from the very beginning that God's in both moments, rather than kind of like what I think kind of a low-lying American prosperity gospel, which is, well, God's in the good moments, and then we have to question and wonder and figure out what's wrong because God's not a part of the bad moments. But like you were saying, and with Abraham's journey, God's in all those moments. How long was he, since you were, because I don't have it off the top of my head, but like between that calling and Isaac being born, what's that time frame? It's like so long.
You
Isn't
talking
it?
about between Abraham's call and Isaac?
Yeah, and the blessing of a son, and then Isaac. Like, isn't it like 40, 50, like 60 years or something? That's
Yeah,
forever.
well, certainly he goes to Haran for a chunk of time, which somebody once told me, I didn't know this. The word Haran, which is the middle place between and Promising, the word Haran means delayed place. It's the place of delay.
Oh,
So he's there for a while, and then Haran dies when he's there, which it's the place and it's his, or it's his brother passes away when he's there, I think is this. Either way, but he's in he's in Haran for a little bit, and then he goes, I don't know, maybe 45, 50 years, right? Like,
yeah, it's like
maybe 60
forever.
years, but that's a long time, man. That's a long time
I know.
to be waiting for what God wants. Yeah. I was just lecturing this morning on Hebrews 11. I'm teaching a Hebrews class. And in Hebrews 11, you've got 16 different people named in the Old Testament who are described as being people of pistis, of faith. And it's the weirdest list, because there's all these people not mentioned who you'd think should be there, like Solomon. But there are people there you'd like, they should not be there. People like Rahab and Sarah, who, when Sarah finds out she's going to get pregnant, as a 90, 100-year-old or whatever it is, she laughs at the Lord. It's like, and she's like, there's no way you're. And I love that she's described as a woman of faithfulness. Through moments of unfaithfulness, she is still a woman of faith. Oh, it's so helpful for me. I can say, Geoff, there were seasons in my own journey of walking along the river in the desert, so many moments of lack of faith and lack of trust, and yet still God's providence and care through it all is just astounding. Yeah.
Well, do you mind? I don't know how to ask. Like sharing some. Like, how was it that at an abstract level? So you don't have to, if you want, you can like get into some of those stories or seasons. But like, how has, as you reflect, maybe going all the way back to your early faith formation, like what was the spiritual environment that you were raised with, and then did it help you in those seasons, or was that early kind of faith formation, did it harm you? Was it actually part of the thing that was making that season so difficult?
Yeah. I don't have in my adult years, Geoff, I one of the greatest jealousies that I experience in my life. It's one of the greatest envies I have. I've got a lot of envies. I often experience, I call it monk envy, but the envy of people that get to go live in a monastery by themselves out in the wilderness. I sometimes wish I could do that. One of the envies that I most find myself getting caught up by is the envy of people who were raised in really awesome Christian homes who had dads that really were there for them. Because I didn't have that in it, and I wasn't raised in a Christian home, and my dad, with all of his flaws, I love him with all of his flaws, so he wasn't, he just wasn't able to be there. And so I've always had this deep jealousy because my family of origin, there was not much spiritual heritage given to me. And in fact, you'll find this interesting. I don't know if I've ever shared this. When I became a Christian at 16, my experience of hearing about Jesus really for the first time, at least memorably the first time, was I was sitting in my math class in high school, and the two girls behind me were arguing about when Jesus was coming back. They had been reading this book called the Left Behind series and were thinking about, when Jesus would return and all these sort of things. And I went home and I started reading the Bible, and that really was the beginning of my story as I started following Jesus around about 16. But I've, in my years since then, have done a lot of work to understand my relationship with my father and why I was so drawn to Jesus, because I remember listening to them say Jesus was coming back. Jesus was coming back. And I think at that age, I was so hungry for my dad to come home that the idea that God was coming back was like, God was actually meeting me in the place where I did not have a secure, attached relationship with my dad. Like God was meeting me by being the one that my dad couldn't be. Because I had a very ambivalent attachment relationship with my dad. It was not secure by any stretch of the imagination. And I think when I heard Jesus is coming back, my little 16-year-old brain heard Dad's coming home.
Wow.
And in a way, like that lack of attachment that I experienced as a kid was what set me up to need God. And in a weird way, like the painful origin story is what it was a setup. I'm not saying God did that. I'm saying God is the master composter who knows how to take a pile of junk and turn it into soil,
Yeah.
But there wasn't much there, Geoff, to speak of in terms of much of a spiritual heritage that led to what I do now. I was pulled out of the fire at 16. The Lord radically saved me, and I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now if it wasn't for the Jesus, for sure. Yeah.
You said that like you don't have a spiritual heritage, but in one sense, I could kind of turn it around and be like, well, you have an insecure spiritual heritage as well as a relational heritage, right? That's, not to get all.
Yeah.
Well, since you brought up Left Behind, we can bring up the God-shaped hole kind of language, right? It feels like that's of the same era.
Yeah.
But, like in one sense, like you were turning to Jesus for that lack of kind of attachment, of having like a secure attachment figure. And I think that in one sense, that's like beautiful and right. Did you find that maybe your experience was kind of had a push-pull with God about that? Like, did sometimes maybe you started expecting God to be like your dad, or was it kind of the opposite where God was just filling in what was lacked? Like, could you?
I would say the greatest work of my young adult years and my first half of life since my turn to the Lord has been allowing God to reparent me, to show me what I didn't get and what I needed and so desperately needed. I have often wondered, I don't think I'm unique. I mean, I think we've all got broken fathers and mothers, and I don't know. I wonder if in God's unique providence, he's actually, in a way chosen to use those insecure paternal maternal relationships as a means to draw our fragmented selves to God. Like that is one of the ways that he chooses to most meet us. But Geoff, to your question, I mean, if my spiritual director were in the room and I gave him $1 for every single time our conversation centered around how God is different than my father, he'd be my son wouldn't be going to college, bro. Yeah, you know, there's this line that that Carl Jung had in one of his journals that's gotten some attention in recent years, in which he talks about the relationship between parents and their children, and how often parents, the void in the parent's heart and life really does tremendous harm in the life of the child. He has this really singular line where he says, the single greatest threat to a child is the unlived life of the parent. And we see this all the time with parents who force their kids to do every sport under the sun and be perfect. Why? Because they're essentially using their child as a means to make up for what they perceive as their own lack. And those parental imprints that we receive can only be healed by a God that doesn't project upon us his own failures. I mean, when we say we have a perfect father, that's really good news for me, because my God is not trying to find his identity in my success. He's perfect by himself, and he doesn't have to project his unlived life onto me. For parents with, for kids who have parents that, project a lot of their stuff onto their kids, that's phenomenal news. Our God is emotionally differentiated. That's great, man.
Well, and that, so between two like theology professors and biblical scholars, that's why like the Trinity matters. It's just like God is eternally self-fulfilled as a differentiated and yet in relationship person in the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, such that anything and all of our interactions with God come out of an overflow, not out of a lack. There is no need to fill in gaps. There's no need to, heal a wound or something in God, in our relationship. And that reduces the anxiety in us. Now, a lot of us have faith formations and churches and our own lived experiences that kind of teach a Christianity that's different than that ups the anxiety tragically, and that ups kind of the burdens and the workloads. But ultimately, it's Luke 15 and the Father going out in joy, rejoicing over us and taking the stupid kids who made a bunch of bad decisions and throwing a ring and a robe on them. And bringing them back in and throwing a party. And that's the abundant life that God offers us. I love it.
That's right.
I've found too, I'd love to hear kind of then how maybe your evangelistic track. But Sid and I have really taken kind of the perspective of basically the gospel, the way it kind of works in our society best is kind of a welcome home. It is like an offer of a new family to people. Rather than, do you know where you're going when you die, or, Jesus takes your sins away, or, and I believe those things are true, right? But like, I don't feel like that's it. Have you found that to be true for yourself, or how have some of these things kind of changed for you?
Yeah.
Share the gospel.
Certainly the gospel, the therapeutic, I think a good theologian would separate would separate the ontological effects of atonement from the therapeutic effects of atonement. And what I mean by that is, ontologically, something happens at the cross that simply is beyond us. We can't name it. It's like there a change of relationship in our relationship with the creator of the universe. There's something that happens that I just think is too mysterious for us to understand. Okay. How you describe it, whatever theory you choose to use, that's fine. But no language that we have can perfectly explain the ontological impacts of the gospel. But the therapeutic effects of the gospel are how we personally experience. You could call it the phenomenological experience of the gospel. How we experience the gospel changes from culture to culture. It is not that the gospel's changed. It's the
just to jump in, when you say the therapeutic effects, you don't just mean like the psychological mental health benefits. It's more like the like a physical therapist, or just the curative, or like the
I think probably the better word would be the either experiential or phenomenological dynamics of the gospel. That is how one experience. You could say this is the subjective side of the atonement. That is how people feel and experience the atonement. I think that changes from person to person, not just culture to culture, person to person. For example, for the person who lives in an honor shame culture where they have experienced years of generational and or cultural shame for something that they've done. They have been driven out of the city. They've been hated. They've been cut off. The way that that person is going to experience the gospel is very different than the way that a person who lives in a suburb, who has everything that they want and everything is fine, experiences the gospel. The gospel is the same for both of them, but their experience of the two is the same. So when I hear it, the experience of both is going to be very different. So when you say, right, that you find the imagery of the coming home, right? Why are we all so homesick at home? Why, right? Why are we always homesick at home? Like what? And that there's this element of like coming home to what is real and true and good, is probably meeting a need in the human soul that is unique to Western culture. I heard Leonard Sweet once said in a lecture I heard him give, that he's a Wesleyan theologian. He gave he had this just passing comment where he said, in most cultures, if you listen to the music of most cultures will sing about the thing that people don't experience or have. So if you go to an African nation that's drought stricken, what will they sing about? They'll sing about water. If you go to a lonely society, what will they sing about? A place like Japan, they'll sing about friendship. And if you think about America, what are we always thinking about? What are we always singing about? We're singing about love.
Right.
We sing about the thing that we don't have. We're longing for. And he made this comment, and in a way, the gospel will hit different people in different ways because it meets them where they are fractured the most.
Mm-hmm.
So in a society like yours that says, hey, it's like coming home. It's returning. It's the prodigal being welcomed by the father. It's the barbecue of the dad who gives the signet ring and the robe. And that's a reason that hits for people. Right? Yeah, there's a reason. There's an old Japanese, like saying that says, rain, when it rains, rain is always silent. Like you never hear rain until it hits something.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it hits, you hear it, but it's silent until it rains. And that's the truth with the gospel, is that when it hits a person, that's when you see it.
Yeah.
Where it hits somebody and how it hits them, that's how you see it, is in its effects on what it does with people. So for somebody like myself, the gospel did not, and the primary experience that I had of the gospel is not feeling forgiveness for endless things of sins that I've done. I was a pretty good kid, actually.
Mm-hmm.
For me, the gospel was dad coming home. It wasn't me coming home. It was actually dad coming.
So how has that, going back to some of your early kind of statements about following the river and the wilderness in your own life and going places that you would not have longed to go, how does that story fit together for you of I'm a kid longing for dad to come home to now I will do hard things and follow Jesus wherever he leads? Like how, not that you can retell your whole life, but like for some people, that doesn't make sense. It's like, well, if I was going to find the thing I was always looking for, then I'd feel free, or then I'd be fulfilled. Then I could do whatever I want. I wouldn't be held back by my demons or my constraints. But you kind of tell a different story, it sounds like. That.
I don't know, Jeff. I mean, I think you're asking a good question. I don't know. I can't say the older that I get, I can't say that I'm increasingly doing the stuff that I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, I find that in the midst of that surrender,
Mm-hmm.
in the midst of that willingness to do the things that maybe my desires don't align with, there's a subterranean joy that is not unlike, it's not like a joy I've ever experienced. There's a weird subterranean joy that comes with submitting your life, surrendering your life to God. I really don't. Maybe I don't have a sophisticated answer.
No, that's all right. That's like the David Benner's book is, Surrender to Love, that surrendering your desires to most people is dangerous, but a God who has proven and demonstrated his love
Yeah.
in this, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us, right? That is a love that you can trust, that you can surrender to, that you can offer your
Yeah.
vulnerabilities to.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I had, I'd have to go do a deep dive in my notes to find it, but I had read at some point a really interesting peer-reviewed study of a guy who, I think it was actually a team of scholars who looked at the relationship between depression and suicidality and one's perceived fulfillment of sexual desires. So the question was like, does getting all of your sexual desires met lead to a happier life? That's basically what the research was asking. And it was peer-reviewed work. Found that actually there's an inverse relationship.
Oh, wow.
Between
really
getting all of your sexual desires met and true, deep, flourishing happiness. And I when I read that study and had come across it, in a way, Geoff, I'm not trying to make a point about sexuality here. I'm trying to make a point that I'm not convinced by the American expression of the gospel that true happiness can be defined as getting everything you want. It's just not. That's not it. And in fact, when I do get everything I want, I find myself to be extremely melancholy and like,
right.
I don't. It's a weird effect to have everything. I am good when I have some sort of cross. I'm really a better person.
Well, so
when
let
I've
me
got
try
some
this
sort
out.
of cross to bear.
Let me try this out on you, because this is kind of how because I don't think it is about like sex.
No,
or,
that's not my point.
sexuality. Yeah. No, I know it's not, but I like the category I'd put it in. So I say it like this: is God created us on the sixth day, the same day as the rest of the animals, but only humanity is invited into the seventh day, the day of rest, the day of Sabbath, which is kind of like that spiritual heritage or reality. And I think this is where, and you mentioned early on, see, you're bringing this all together, AJ. You mentioned wanting to be a monk, right? And and a lot of times monks or asceticism, they get a hard kind of rap about kind of the extremism. But I think their conviction is there's, man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. And I think that, when all of our physical satisfaction or all of our physical desires are fulfilled, whether it's sexual, whether it's, just physical hunger, things like that, or delight, like there is a sense in which our spirits wither.
Yeah, that's right.
And then that melancholy, but not that we have to be a rigorous asceticism, mortify the body, whatever tradition you come from talks about that. But there is a sense in which when you cultivate those deeper spiritual pursuits, or like you say, just obediently follow Jesus where he leads me.
Yeah.
There is a nourishing of the soul. Like you said, like I've never been happier carrying my cross, right? That's the life of the Spirit.
Yeah. Not only, but I have no idea how you're going to name this episode, by the way.
Me neither. Why don't you let me know?
But while you bring up the animals and humans in the sixth day of creation, it is equally notable that when you compare the humans, and this is I do a whole section on this in my book, The Gift of Thorns. When you compare the humans and the animals, in the story, the animals are created in pairs, so they're created immediately in pairs together, which means they're immediately man and woman together, man and woman together, man and woman together. Yet in the beautiful, inspired creation of humans, day 6 in Genesis 2, the man is created before the woman and has to wait for her. And there was a theologian years ago, Balthasar, who talked about how the humans, this is a distinct element of the Imago Dei, is that the humans are the one, to be a human is to wait. Like, to not pursue your glands, to not follow your stomach, to not have a god of the stomach, that you can wait, which is a distinct difference between the animals and humans. My dog does not have the capacity to withhold his desires for bones. I do. Well, sometimes I do, but nor do I eat bones. But my point remaining the same is that there's a unique element. And Balthasar says this: isn't it interesting that the creatures in the garden, other than God, that have the most power, meaning the most ability to destroy or care for the garden, are the ones with the most power are the ones required to wait. So when power does not have any capacity to wait, unrestrained, it always leads to destruction.
Oh,
So
that's like a whole nother podcast we should schedule and talk about.
So when I mean, if we have power but don't have restraint to wait, you look at the political spectrum. We don't need to go. Yeah. So power without restraint is
AJ is restraining himself right now.
Look at this right now in the spot. You see it?
Yeah, he's restrained. Well, just to add to that is a lot of the ascetic writers would say, I was raised evangelical with a big Baptist and Reformed kind of view, which is that God placed the tree of good and evil in the garden to let humanity know that he's the lawgiver and that they're the law follower, right? It's just very but the Eastern Orthodox tradition and the early kind of monastics would say, well, that was just the first fast. Like they had to have something that was appealing to the eye that they would restrain themselves from partaking in. For it, and the Eastern Church and the early church fathers would say that fruit was supposed to be theirs eventually anyways, but they had to develop, right, a certain restraint in order to handle that kind of power and knowledge. And so so fasting is kind of the first spiritual practice, and it's
That's
given
really
to us
funny.
in the garden.
The first fast.
Well, of course, the monastics would come up with that. Well, so AJ, he is just for
let's talk in the third person.
Yeah. But all you listeners, AJ is prolific. He's written books on the Sabbath, Gift of Thorns, which I had mentioned. So about this whole taking the path and discipling our desires, he's written on that. But you've come out, you're about to come out. With a recent book, which is about becoming teachable.
Yes,
a teachable spirit.
That's right.
Learning the virtues from strangers, or learning the virtue of learning from strangers, enemies, and absolutely anybody. Kind of where, can you let us know, where did this book kind of come from?
This is this actually comes from a pretty concrete story for me. Most written things come out of a real story. Why did it come? And it came from, for me, an experience of watching the news. This was a couple years ago. I was watching the news. By the way, dumb thing to do. Don't watch the news.
Who does that anymore? How old are you? You watch the news.
But I was watching it. And I was watching the story of a woman, a youngish 25, 30-year-old woman who's in the political world. She's not an elected official, but she was worked for somebody who was an elected official. And she had gotten caught up in this kind of she'd gotten kind of involved with some nefarious individuals and did some stupid things and never hurt anybody. It was never, that sort of thing. But she just done some stupid stuff and she got caught for it. And the story that I was watching was her on her in her trial. And she was, 25, 30 years old, new in her career. And she's giving a statement in the trial. And I'm watching her give the statement. And you can tell when somebody's tears are real and when they are not. And this woman wept in front of the court. These were not crocodile tears. They were real tears. And she was saying, I was wrong. I'm sorry. I'm going to learn a lesson from this. And I want to be a different person. She's young in her career. Who doesn't do something stupid early in their years? Yeah. Right. Okay. So I'm watching her. And I'm getting super emotional watching her be humble, because we never see that in our culture anymore. I mean, it's so rare to watch someone in the public space now own their stuff. It's so rare. And so I watched that, and that evening I made the second mistake of that day, which was I got on social media. And I was sort of hoping this could be a moment of redemption. Let the girl learn her lesson. It's okay. Be it,
Yeah.
And I got on, and it took me about 10 seconds to see. I mean, the entire other side of the political spectrum just dunked on this girl. I mean, calling her every name under the sun, that she's a complete failure. She's so stupid. Had she listened to us, she wouldn't have done this. And I'm watching this, Geoff, and the combination of this woman who was willing to be vulnerable and own her stuff, combined with a culture that's dunking on her for her quote unquote stupidity. I had this epiphany that is why it has become nearly impossible, or it has become so risky to embody being a teachable person in our world.
Yeah.
Because we live in a world that demands that everybody repents, but the minute that they do, we tar and feather them.
Right.
Rather than celebrating the fact that we're looking at a humble person owning their stuff and saying, like, I've been wrong. What should happen is that we collectively take a deep breath, look at a woman who's owning her stuff and saying, this is awesome. Learn a lesson. Don't do it again. And I think, Geoff, what that did for me, that was the start of this book. Although I've been writing this book for a long time, but we have weaponized humility. Or I should say, it's not that we've weaponized humility. We now dunk on teachable people.
Right.
And we shame people willing to risk learning and growing. And I'm putting my foot down. That's what this book is about. I'm putting my foot down, and I'm saying, in a world of just shaming and mean-spiritedness and one-upmanship, where we would rather dunk on people than honor the gift of God in their life, and rather than seeing people as image-bearing creations of God, people that we use to make political points, that the Christian must be different.
Yeah.
And that we cultivate the humility, teachability, to be learners in a world that is just, it's a forest of shame.
Yeah. Well, in our kind of hot take society where everyone has to have an opinion, you have to present yourself as being informed. I know,
because to admit that you're not informed is perceived as somebody giving up their power.
Right.
Because if I don't know something, then I'm not powerful, and you now have power over me. And honestly, how many times I'm sitting here in my office at the university, how many times have I had students sit in my classroom who don't want to be taught because they have had teachers that teach them through shame and made them feel horrible for not knowing something.
Oh yeah.
Good teachers don't teach through shame. Do you know who our teacher is? This is so cool. This is a little Dallas Willard for you. You'll like this. I know you like some D-dub. You're a D-dub guy. Okay. Dallas Willard's, when we read the story of Jesus, we find that he says near the end of his earthly life, he says, I'm going to send the teacher, or I'm going to send the Spirit who will lead you into all truth. And the idea of being led into all truth is that, you know who your teacher is? The Spirit of God is your teacher. We don't have a teacher in the classroom. We have a teacher inside of it. The teacher is in us, which means that anytime I learn something that is true, it is the Spirit's gift to lead me into that thing. Here's why I love this. Dallas Willard would always talk about how that Jesus is always the smartest person in any room he's ever in. It doesn't matter if it's a mechanic, if it's a carpenter, if it's a doctor, if it's an astrophysicist, if it's a biologist, if it's a pastor, if it's a Bible scholar. In every single room Jesus would ever be in, he is the smartest person in the room. And I think that when Jesus sent the Spirit, it's his Spirit in us, which means that only by virtue of the Spirit can you truly be the kind of learner we were created to be. So to be a Christian means to be a learner. To be a Christian, in fact, the word disciple literally means to learn, lethetes, to be a learner.
Yeah. Well, and it seems that, like you said, Jesus was always the smartest person there, but he never lorded that over people.
Yeah, that's right.
And only the people that would kind of get the sharp end of that stick were the unteachable ones, the Pharisees, the scribes, the priests, sometimes Peter, all right, who were taking that position. But otherwise, he's not just, he is because, you said the word vulnerable a bit ago, and I was literally writing it down while you were talking about. But I just had an interview with someone else, and we were talking about the connection between honesty and humility. And it does feel like people don't want to be honest about, especially about their pains and hurts, and their limitations and the vulnerabilities. And so then there's also a lack of humility. It just seems there's, the old, maybe you've seen this. It's like one of these cartoon memes. It's with a robot voice, and it's like just pencil sketches. Like, what are the 3 hardest things to say in the English language? I'm sorry, I love you, and Worcestershire sauce, right? And then it just stumbles Worcestershire.
Who
But
said that? Is that you?
No. It's just one of these memes. It's one of these cartoons.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. It's one of these cartoons. But really, like the third one, not Worcestershire sauce, but like the third one is to say something like, I don't know. Like, I'm sorry, I love you, and I don't know. Like, I don't have an opinion on that, or I'm going to have to look into that. Or, I just won't add my opinion because it's not very well formed. And
I can't say Worcestershire.
Exactly.
Worcestershire.
Well, we'll just end on that note, right?
That's
Because I don't know if we can bring it back. But thank you so much. Where can people find some of the stuff you're doing and your books? You also have a podcast, which I haven't brought up. Could you just share about that too?
I would just say, hey, if you can buy a book, get it at the mom pa store down the street, if possible. They should have a Teachable Spirit. Elsewhere, you can get it anywhere else books are sold. Probably the best way to keep up with what I'm doing. I'm like the worst social media guy in the history of all social media.
So your mental health must be okay.
I'm doing all right. Yeah,
Maybe
thank
not.
you. I'm doing all right.
Yeah.
I have a fairly, I'm pretty proud of it. A fairly decent weekly devotional that I write called The Low Level Theologian, and you can find that just by looking up The Low Level Theologian. It's just like
I believe that's a Substack, right?
It is
I
a
think I'm
Substack, but it's a weekly devotional that I do on Thursdays. And that's a fun way to keep up with the things I'm.
Nice. And then you're also, did you mention slow theology?
I didn't. My friend Nijay Gupta and I host we feel is a stellar 2.5-star podcast called Slow Theology.
3.25 at least.
Thank you. That's
out of 100.
But Slow Theology comes out. We do about an episode a week, and it's super fun. We love what we get to do. And he and I actually do have a book coming out entitled Slow Theology, 8 Practices to Develop a Resilient Faith in a Chaotic World. And that will come out next September. So that will be available.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yep.
Well, for listeners, there is an episode with Nijay about one of his most recent books on the affections.
Such a good book.
Of Paul and God and love. But yeah, I already know I'm going to have one or both of you on later this year to talk about slow theology. I love that. Well, thank you so much.
Brother.
I'm on Eastern time and you're in Pacific, so
go to
I
bed,
still
bro.
got a bit of your day.
Go to bed.
But yeah, I'm going to go find a book and unwind. If only I had a book around here to read. If only I could find one. Well, God bless, and thank you so much.